It's a real privilege to be a part of this committee. We are the most bipartisan committee out of 20 in Congress. We have a tradition of voting on NDAAs with large majorities year after year. And it's important not to be a Republican first in here or a Democrat first. We're Americans trying to ensure that our country is well defended. And in that spirit, I compliment the operations in Iran. I served 30 years in the Air Force. We were attacked repeatedly by proxy groups from Iran on every deployment I was on. They were the #1 threat where I was located. I've lost friends, like at Khobar Towers. Iran with a nuclear weapon would have been an existential threat to our country. And if they had a missile that could hit New York, they would have done it. They would have done it 2 months ago. So I support our operations there. I think it was good that we got Maduro out. You know, I would say it would be important to get the representative government that duly won their election there, and not good to replace one dictator with another dictator, but Maduro was bad for their country. And I support our 5% GDP spending. There's no way to modernize our nuclear force, 6th-generation fighters, take care of our men and women in uniform without being at 5% GDP. But also in the spirit, I share a bipartisan concern of the firings that we've seen at the Pentagon. 4 of the 6 service chiefs, for example, the Coast Guard. We had a huge bipartisan majority here that had confidence in the Army Chief of Staff and the Secretary of Navy. And I would just point out, it may be constitutionally right. You have the constitutional right to do these things, but it doesn't make it right or wise. Now, my first question is dealing with the housing allowance, something I've been working for the last 2 or 3 years. Our housing allowance is underpaying people in certain areas. And the department, and it hasn't started under this administration, it's been going on for a while, they take out 5% of the housing allowance. They send it to other needs. But that means we're underpaying our servicemen and women living off base by 5%. So we tried to fix it with a $2.9 billion line item to fix housing allowance, but that money was moved. So Mr. Secretary, could you tell us how we're going to fix this? Because we have a shortfall in housing allowance, and we tried to fix it out of here, and I'd like to get it fixed.
Congressman, I agree with you. I think that is precisely the kind of quality of life issue that's been ignored time and time again. Oftentimes with good intentions of trying to do some trade-off with something else. But I mentioned the 7% pay increase. That's just for junior enlisted. It's 6% from E6 to 03, and it's 5% from 04 all the way up. But closing that gap, TRICARE reimbursement's a big one we're going to look at as well. If we reimburse TRICARE lower than Medicare, then no one wants to take TRICARE, and now you don't have a real network for service members. So those places where we pinched pennies to try to eke out additional budget space have really hurt service members. So I'm committed to working with you on that to close that gap and ensure that folks can live where they are asked to serve because they can afford housing.
Okay, I think this has already been addressed to a degree, but I just want to emphasize, we did put $400 million in for Ukraine. I asked you to execute it. It's important for most of us in here. It has overwhelming support. Also, I'm the chair of the Baltic Security Caucus, and we've put money in for the Baltic Security Initiative. These people love America. They love freedom more than anywhere I've ever been, and they need us. They're on the front lines with Russia. I have a question for the chairman. So we did 29 years of the nuclear alert, airborne alert, the Looking Glass mission. In 1991, we turned that off because the Cold War turned to our favor. But I think we're back to where we were at. Russia's a threat. China's building a nuclear force to match ours. I think we need a Looking Glass 2 and restore that nuclear command and control survivability that gives us deterrence. Russia, China needs to know no matter what they do, we can launch those 400 ICBMs. What's your vision for the Looking Glass 2 or the follow-on?
Well, sir, as you know, right now we're looking at all 3 legs of the nuclear triad to make sure that most critical backstop on our nation's most important day is reliable, redundant, and workable. And so we'll take a look at that. I know the team already deep in analysis on all from NC3 to the end state. But what I want you to know is the most important thing is the ability to execute if we had to, and we can.
You know, for 29 years we had a plane airborne with the general on board, and it gave the Pentagon, the White House, STRATCOM the assurance that we had a backup. I think we're back to the future. And
sir,
I
I just,
appreciate your look at it.
I just flew with them, and they were doing great work.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk briefly about the current U.S. doctrine and conduct of the administration in a particular event and a series of events, actually. As everybody in the dais and the witness table is aware, the Department of Defense Law of War Manual specifies that any order to kill shipwrecked persons in an illegal order would constitute a war crime. It isn't suggested. There's a specific example to show a clear-cut example of what this entails in our own manual. With that in mind, let's look back a few weeks ago when a fishing crew ended a long day of hard fishing, scoring a full stock of albacore and swordfish on board. Without any warning or expectation, this small Ecuadorian fishing vessel, operating about 200 nautical miles off the Galapagos Islands, was militarily engaged by U.S. forces. It was hit once, then it was hit again. Not a warning shot, not an interdiction, 2 drone strikes. Survivors described chaos and severe injuries. Our U.S. forces then handcuffed the crew at gunpoint, placed black hoods over their heads, seized and scrubbed their devices, and then held them for days. Ultimately, the crew was released, given there was no evidence to support any narco activity or any charges that may be against them. So to recap, we struck a vessel, we struck it again, set fire to it as it was sinking, and as public reports say, even drank their beer. We detained the survivors, and then we let them go. This should be eye-opening. Now let's go to another example, the double tap or 2-strike attack that took place on September 2nd in the Caribbean. A vessel was struck, disabled, and then struck again, killing all but 2 survivors that were left clinging to the wreckage. And this is the thing. We know this happened. We know how it happened, and the Defense Department still refuses to release the follow-up video of the killing of the shipwrecked survivors, even though they released the initial one to the public in major news networks worldwide. No difference in sources and methods in the 2 videos, but still not released to the public. Of course, the backlash was severe at the time and perhaps is being forgotten. An unpredictable but ignoble display of character from this administration. Fingers were pointed at one another as everyone scurried to cover, in a tacit acknowledgement that this was an issue potentially violating international law. Now, I've reviewed what's been available, the phony rationale that these attacks are about fentanyl trafficking, when we know fentanyl comes from China, India, through Mexico. Then the baseless argument that this was about narco-terrorism. You know, I don't believe a word of it. This was to create leverage for regime change in Venezuela. And now the president acknowledged that was about oil. Beyond the simple need for justice and exercising American values, it's important for us to discuss what the U.S. belligerence in the world stage means to our security, our ability to marshal cooperation with our allies, and most importantly, not to normalize these actions that could endanger the lives of our own service members put in similar peril. Let me be clear about one thing. Whether it's these particular strikes discussed here, the one that killed 11 others off the coast of Venezuela, whether it's the 178 other killings, with each of these extrajudicial killings, the administration is pirating American values. We'll continue to investigate this. We will. It'll come forward in the future. Some days that second video will be released. But we've got to stop also using our precious resources that are being taxed so heavily all over the world on actions that hurt our military. They hurt our military and they hurt our standing internationally, and they're hurting our standard here at home. I hope that we can move forward. I hope we can review whether these are justified, because I found no justification. We were given classified information on the second strike. I can't discuss it, but I must tell you, it's the most convoluted bullshit I ever heard in my life. This should be public. This is our honor. This is what it makes American a difference maker. This is what we're
An
proud
incredible
of with our
array
military.
of false accusations.
And I yield back
Incredible.
my time.